Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research-based information that fits your family. I'm Lori Cordles, parent of 3 in 2 different life stages. 2 are launched and 1 is still in high school, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of 2 littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator. Today, we'll talk about the realities of raising a family and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Science of Parenting podcast.
Welcome. We're glad you came back. This is season 9, right? Yeah, 9.
We're talking all about regulation still. I mean, sometimes I'm like, still. And then I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say that because maybe that sounds like I'm sick of it. Right? I'm like, no, just like still.
No, like still. We're still in regulation.
We're still going. It's good. Yeah. And last week we took a look again at that self-determination theory.
We did.
AKA kids have, everybody, not just kids, have these 3 basic needs, and that when we help meet them, we create an environment that helps them regulate. So that's a good thing. So
it is.
We can encourage the regulation by meeting those needs.
I need a timeout to just jump on a soapbox here for a second and just say, I was teaching a class the other day and talking about our podcast, and the people in the room were talking about listening to season 3, Temperament. And I was saying, well, this current class we're talking about is positive discipline. So you could start listening to season 8, Positive Discipline.
Yes, you can.
And they were like, oh, no, we have to go in order. So I want to take this moment as your co-host in podcast land to say, you do not have to start from season 1 and go all the way through in order. Like, you legitimately can choose to jump into our podcast anytime something sounds super interesting to you. Now, if it's taken you 1 through 9 seasons to finally get here, and now you're like, oh, now she tells us it's season 9. Sorry about that. Because I actually
didn't know season 53, they'll be so glad we told them early.
They will be so glad when they are at season 53 and are like, oh, I've been jumping around and bouncing around to what makes sense to me. So,
oh yeah, I completely agree. We're gonna let that go.
Yeah,
you're like,
back to our regularly scheduled programming on
right?
regulation.
Here we go.
I just needed to take a moment to say that. Okay.
Yes. Thank you for saying it.
Okay, so this week again, we are going to look at several citations from the Handbook of Parenting, Volume 5, specifically the chapter on child regulation from Dr. Wendy Rolnick and colleagues. So those are where our citations are coming from. Super great book on, it's a handbook, goodness sakes, on parenting of all things.
Right. And we do have a couple extra this week, not just from that. We took like a little different, little different journey here in this episode, because we get to talk about attachment and how that's related to regulation. So we're talking about attachment today, some from that chapter and some other just good stuff you got to talk about. Or we don't have to. We're excited to.
Yeah. You're just going to have to listen. So we're going to dive right into what is attachment. I love thinking of attachment as the title that we said, attachment and connection. Like, to me, that's my word picture. Something's attached. And in this case, it's the child and the adult, right? And when the child and adult are attached, what it does is it gives the child feelings of safety, feelings of security, feelings of protection. And ultimately, the adult is like, that's the safe base. Did you play tag as a kid? Like, I'm base. I'm the parent. I'm base, right? And attachment theory actually comes from the 1950s. And so specifically in the 1950s, they were looking at infants and attachment. But we're really going to talk about attachment through the life cycle of the child. But yeah, I'm base. I'm base.
Yes, I'm on base.
I'm on base.
So Bowlby and Ainsworth are really credited with this attachment theory. And that initial study was focused on infants. And honestly, the sample was mostly like middle-class white people, so we keep that in mind of who all was included in gathering that data. But what they found in that study is basically there's 4 different types of attachment. So again, that kind of the tie between the parent and the child, and in that case, the infant, but we aren't going to go through all four. There's like anxious avoidant. Actually, I've been seeing them on social media. It's like a thing on one of the platforms I'm on that they're talking about all these different kinds of attachment. And I'm like, yeah, that's the real stuff. Thank you, Bolby.
Yes, yes.
But we're going to focus today on secure attachment. Like, what does it look like when we're securely attached with our kids? So, secure attachment.
Secure attachment. So here's what I think of when I think of a strong attachment, secure attachment. Our
Hmm.
kids feel happy around us. They feel secure around us. They know they can trust us. When we leave, they might have a little protest or 10.
Yeah.
And then when we return, that they're happy. And again, the research that Bowlby and friends did was with infants, but establishing attachment can grow throughout the child's life cycle,
Yes.
and sometimes we feel less attached at other times, maybe during those teen years, but we're still forming strong attachments through their lifespan.
Yeah, a lot of that research was focused on infants, but yeah, since then, they're like, "Hey, all over
Mhm.
the lifespan, we see the importance of attachment and how it like wanes and grows and
Yes.
it's the whole place." And one thing that I think is interesting about attachment theory is okay, and I like confession, I have a degree in human development, like, which doesn't mean I know everything, but I felt pretty informed. Like, I know some stuff.
I know
I
stuff.
was right, and I'm like passionate about parenting research. Last year, like a year ago, so if you've heard the term attachment parenting, it's like a movement in
Mhm.
parenting. Um, I didn't know that attachment parenting and attachment theory were not the same thing. Like I just
Wow.
assumed that they were like based on each other. Totally separate, actually. So, attachment theory, 1950s, Bowlby focuses on like secure attachment. Um, and then attachment parenting actually came from a book by Sears and Sears in the 1990s. And so they talk about these like they call them like the 7 Bs. They're basic practices that are involved in attachment parenting. And so it's like a specific checklist of items. And so the just that those are different. Like I'm not saying
Mhm.
one or the other. I'm just saying today we're talking about attachment theory, which is a different thing than attachment parenting. Like they mean different things. And there's actually a fantastic article on this confusion from, I want to make sure I get it right, the Greater Good Science Center from Berkeley. They have a great article about attachment parenting versus attachment theory and that confusion. So I was like, what? I just assumed that they were the same thing. No, no, different.
They're
Interesting
different.
to me.
They're different.
Fascinating. No end.
Awesome. And in all honesty, I think that had I given much thought to the two, I can't say that I wouldn't have made the same
Yeah.
confusion. I wouldn't have
Yes.
I thought the same thing. Like, are that no?
Right?
It's
And I even like I follow on social media, like pages that are related to one or the other, and I hadn't connected the dots that they're actually based on not like opposite ideas, like but that they're not related. I assumed that
sure,
one fed the other, and it's like, okay, no, they're separate based
sure.
on totally different things. So,
Well, here's a
interesting.
little bit more research then on specifically attachment
Yes.
theory, right? And so this information comes from the Institute of Child Development at the University of Minnesota. And essentially, these colleagues there have studied attachment theory for over 40 years,
Yeah.
right? So, and basically, what they're saying is attachment is this deep, abiding confidence. Like I feel warm and fuzzy just saying those words.
Mm,
This deep, abiding confidence a baby has in the availability and responsiveness of the caregiver. So the baby
yes.
knows the caregiver is available to them and that they're responding to whatever those needs are. I love that. 40 years of
Right?
research says that attachment is that baby feeling like you're there for them and responding to them.
Yes, and so Dr. Saroof is the one that's from University of Minnesota, who we like take this quote from. And yeah, I love the like deep, abiding confidence. But
Yes.
also, he talks about the importance that attachment gives for exploration. Like because children are securely attached, they can explore their environment because they have
Mhm.
base, right? They can run out and play tag
Base.
and
Yeah.
then run back to home base to be safe
Yes.
again. But he also talks about that developing secure attachment is not a set of tricks. So it's not
Mhm.
like these things you must do or you won't get secure attachment. Um,
Yes.
he's like, that's not it. He talks about it as an ongoing process, which
Mhm.
honestly, I'm like, that's kind of a relief for me, as I
Yes.
think about parenting,
Yes.
and I've shared before my experience with certain parenting practices that I was like, "Must do,"
Yeah.
right? And the shame that I came when that didn't work out with my kids and
Mhm.
all of that. I'm like, there's a lot of grace in knowing there's a lot of different ways I can develop secure attachment instead of just must, must, must. So
Yes.
that was like, I like that he described it as not a bag of tricks, but not a
Yes.
checklist, just an ongoing process we build.
It
I
is.
loved that.
So, what does this have to do with regulation?
Mm, right? I feel like that's what I ask all season. I'm like,
Right?
okay,
Yeah.
okay, there's all this background.
Yeah. Yeah. What does this
Attachment,
have to do with regulation?
regulation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, basically, here's a really simple answer. The more secure attachment we have with our kids, the better our child is able to regulate their behaviors.
Mm,
That's it. Plain and
say it
simple.
again. Say it again.
The stronger our attachment is with our child, the better our child is able to regulate their behaviors.
Mm,
That's it.
that's great. That's the connection.
Yeah.
When they're securely attached, they can regulate. Okay, I'm going to say it another way.
Okay.
Our caregiving responses as parents um, shape our children's ability to regulate their emotion. And I love this, explore their emotional responses. They can right.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
can
Yes.
try out, which like, hello, I have been witness
Uh,
to that
yeah.
to
Let me
my
try out
children.
this response today, Mama.
That's the hitting. What?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
talked about that last season, but um they can explore those emotional responses
Mhm.
because they feel safe. So yes, it can be the case that your children melt down with you and are
Mhm.
quote unquote more difficult
Mhm.
to you than other people because you have secure attachment because
Mhm.
they are on home base and they're
They're on
safe
home base.
here.
They feel safe. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
But that connection that basically when we can establish secure attachment with our kids, which we build over time, right? It's not
Mhm.
like, oh, my children, and I know you talk about with temperament, my kids were, she's already won. Am I too
Yes.
late?
I
Same
blew it.
thing. There's a great window in the early childhood years to develop it. But if your kids are older than that and you're learning about secure attachment, it's not too late because we
Mhm.
keep building it over time.
We do. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And thinking about this idea of attachment and regulation makes me think of one of our podcast curator, Barb, makes me think of one of her favorite words. Can you think of what word I'm thinking of?
Oh, yes. I know. I know. Co-regulation.
Yes.
Yes. Co-regulation.
I feel like I'm in her
We do it
head. Like,
together. Yes.
yeah, co-regulation. We can
Co-regulation.
regulate together because we're attached. We have a secure attachment. And
Yes.
I also would like to acknowledge for a second my soapbox for today.
Yes.
Um, we talked in a previous episode about how we might have feelings around the word independence.
Mhm.
I think that we could have feelings around the word attached.
We could.
That for
Absolutely.
some people, that might feel, we talk about like the word detached. Like
Yes.
maybe we feel like our parents weren't emotionally available to us,
Mhm.
or that, physically, right? Like they weren't in the same home as me. And so you
Right.
don't feel attached. Or I think of like in relationships, people talk about like, well, are you attached or unattached? So I just think
Yes.
like there's connotations to this word attached or physically, like, like, like when we call our kids Velcro.
Oh, yes.
I can also think of that when I think of
Yes.
attached in parenting. So, like, okay, what were we talking about?
And I think of the bungee cord,
Attachment.
like it goes
Oh,
out,
yeah.
comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out, comes in.
Yes.
Or, a
And
rubber
that's
band.
to me, that's attachment theory. Like, that's what we're
Mhm.
talking about. It's not the Velcro attached. It's not the relationship attached. It's not the detached or attached.
Yes.
It's,
Yes.
yeah, word picture, Lori. It's the bungee cord of like, I feel secure with you and I can go out and explore and come
Mhm.
back to home base.
Yes.
Mm. Actually, I have a sign in my office. Okay, full side note.
Yeah.
Full tangent. I have a sign in my office that's a quote from a book that talks about oh, what's her name? It's gonna elude me. I can look. Margaret Weiss Brown.
Okay.
Talks about if you become a bird, I can become the tree that you come home to. and I've never connected before right now. I read that book to my kids. I always have. I love that book, Runaway Bunny. But
Mhm.
that if you become a bird, I can become a tree you come home to. And I've never connected it until you said bungee cord. That's secure
Attachment.
attachment.
That is.
Okay. End
Okay,
tangent.
super cool.
Back to regular scheduled programming while I cry.
Back to our regular yes. Oh, goodness. Today's podcast episode brought to you by
Mackenzie
Squirrel.
Spears.
Sorry.
Okay, so there's this term when we talk about attachment. So in the research, they talk about MRO, a mutually responsive orientation.
Okay.
Okay, a
Mutually
mutually
responsive
responsive
orientation. Got it.
orientation.
Okay.
So my understanding, so it is Kochanska and their colleagues developed this definition in like the late 90s and they keep publishing about it, into the early 2000s. But basically, when we think, it's like, okay, big words, but let's think literal. Mutually responsive orientation. Basically, it's this idea of like a default tendency or a natural tendency between a parent and child to respond to each other, to have that back and forth in a way that they're kind of, um, they say mutually binding or mutually cooperative. And that really it's this warmth and even they use the word eagerness between
Mm.
parents and children to cooperate and respond to one another's cues, which very much to me sounds like what we talk about with co-regulation. But yeah, so mutually responsive orientation, it can be this tendency between a parent and child that they respond to each other. They show up for each other. They just and I was like, that's a beautiful. I don't know why I love terminology.
Yes,
I
I
love
do. Yes.
technical terminology. And then we're like, wait, why is it so technical? Because Mackenzie always makes it technical. Calm
Well,
it down, Ken.
it seems like this volley and return,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's very fluid. It's back and
Mm,
forth and back and forth.
mhm.
And the idea that this warmth, and responsive
Yes.
cooperation. Okay, so the idea that what this is doing is creating strong attachment, which again, when it comes to regulation says doing this volley return, serve
Mhm.
and back and forth helps our child better regulate themselves.
Yes.
I mean, kind of, I don't want to, it sounds like it's a no-brainer. Like just respond to your
Yeah.
child. Okay. But
Just be
am
mutually
I
responsive
okay?
orientation, okay?
Your terminology and I'm oversimplification.
Good thing. Good thing we're both. But yeah, so I mean, we've been like powering through this, like, right? What's attachment? How is it
Mhm,
related to regulation? And then, like, how can we, I mean, like, conceptualize it is kind of what I see with
mhm.
this like mutually responsive orientation. But so, like, okay, slow down, full research brain, pause. We're going to set that on the side.
'Kay.
Okay, what does attachment look like? What does this mutually responsive orientation look like in our lives? What is it? What's it look like for you as you think about what we're talking about with the mutually responsive orientation? Do you have any examples or anything?
Okay, so I see pictures in my head of different phases of my girl's life. So when they were
Mhm.
little, I see me maybe just like sitting on the couch with them,
Yeah.
maybe reading a book, maybe holding onto their stuffed animals, just having a conversation back and
Mhm.
forth about them. And then I also see me holding them after they've had a meltdown or a
Ooh.
tantrum.
Yes.
And I think that I also see me, you know,
Mm.
being dysregulated. And what does that look like? Maybe I'm having a meltdown
Yes.
and essentially really allowing them to see me be authentic and vulnerable. I feel like when it comes to a strong attachment, I've let my girls see me be sad or
Mm.
angry or nervous, scared, happy, excited, all the feelings, right?
Yes.
I feel like I've not tried to hide any from them as a way to let them know that they also don't have to hide any from me. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Like when it comes to attachment, like I'm here for
Yes.
you, you're here for me. Yes, I'm the adult.
Yes. Well, and I think okay, so I hear like two words in what you're describing.
Mhm.
One is that you're showing up authentically for your kids.
Yes, I
So,
hope
right?
to I
Like,
try. I really
yeah, but, like,
try.
this is who I am, even though that is far from
Mhm.
perfect. Not that you're far from perfect.
Oh, yeah. I am.
Even though, this is who I am, but I also hear you talking about the vulnerability that's
Mhm.
involved, like, yeah, difficult emotions or meltdowns or yeah, that's what
Yes.
I hear you saying, I guess. Would you say that's
I
accurate? Like,
but
that's fair?
yes, and I think that there are periods of their life and my life where I was better at being authentic and vulnerable, but I think that when it comes to the little research tidbits that we shared,
Mhm.
I see us together, like,
Mm.
together in whatever
Yeah.
feelings we're having,
Mhm.
we're together. If
Yes.
they're good feelings, bad feelings, hard feelings, easy feelings, together, here we are, showing up together for the
Oh,
feelings,
I
all the
love that.
feelings.
All the feelings.
All the feelings, here we are.
Oh,
How about
I
you?
love that. I love that. So, I guess kind of the first thing that comes to mind when I'm like, "Okay, mutually responsive orientation."
Yes.
Um, I think of something I'm trying to do that I don't do all the time is trying to shift from it's me against you, trying to get you to
Mm,
comply, trying to shift myself out of that mindset to, like, what's more mutual?
yes.
And so trying to think about this is us together against the problem. Like, how can we
Mhm.
problem solve? So that's kind of what I think of as like trying to shift that mindset so it can be an orientation or a natural tendency.
Yes.
Um, but for a more specific example, actually, Barb was helping me because I was a little bit stuck. And so my daughter recently went to an activity that she hadn't been to before. It was in a different
Mm,
place than we'd ever been before. She was not an activity like it was dance. She hadn't done that before. It was kind of a chance to try it out. And some of our usual temperament informed strategies didn't quite work out for reasons that I will not disclose.
ah.
I was late. Okay. And went to the wrong place. Okay. And, but we got there and my daughter was just dysregulated, right?
Mhm.
She was overwhelmed with the feelings that she was having. And I didn't necessarily put my finger on it, but Barb was like, but you were mutually responsive with the strategies that we used once we were there. So, you know, staying a little while, staying in her proximity initially, helping her get going in the group, helping her get started while she bungee cord, right? While she had a
Mhm.
safe base, a home base to start from. And then it was sitting on the side for a while when she was ready to get up there. And I just kind of sat and went to a place that was further away, but she could still see me. And then eventually I could leave. Like, I felt like she was solid in that I would be back in an hour to pick her up, right? And so that yeah, just, like, as an example of what it can look like in our lives and, like, the day to
Mhm.
day, I hope that was me showing up for her, and
Absolutely.
that tie that, like, "You're safe here. I know it doesn't feel like it yet, but, like, I can help you get there."
Mhm.
And so that was kind of like a recent like, last weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like, if that physical proximity that you said, like, I see us as parents beside our children, next to our children, as
Mhm.
opposed to sometimes pushing them forward ahead of us.
Oh,
Strong
yes.
attachment to me says we're together beside each other
Mhm.
instead of me just pushing you forward and I'll be back here. And there are times that
Yes.
we need that too, but I
Yes.
think that
Yes.
strong attachment you were recognizing she needed you to be her buffer and be beside her and be close and
Yes. And
instead
I
of
think
push your gear in the door and running back to the car.
yes, and there are times when that has been our approach, like, and that's gone well.
Sure.
So it's definitely that responsiveness piece of, like, what do we need right now so you, like, feel safe, and the
Mhm.
whole point of us, I had to keep in mind, I'm like, "What is the goal of
Yes.
this activity?" The goal of us trying this was, you're trying out something new. We
Yes.
hope you're gonna have fun, and you know what? Maybe you're stretching some of your
Yes.
skills of being somewhere unfamiliar, like, that's a goal too. And so it's like, what is if we keep that goal in mind, what is the responsiveness
Yes.
that was needed? So,
Love
it
it.
wasn't that technical when I was doing it, right? I wasn't like, "What
Yeah.
responsiveness level?"
Here I
Uh,
am being responsive. Watch
um,
me go.
right? But those are things we do intuitively do with our kids. Why did I decide to approach it this way one time and a different way another? Because you have a strong parental
Mhm.
intuition. Um, and so we lean into that.
Mhm.
So
Awesome.
Okay. So,
All right.
mutually responsive orientation. Basically, that natural tendency that to have a back and forth of
Mhm.
showing up for each other with a foundation of a secure attachment. So that's a good thing.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to use MRO, mutually
MRO.
responsive orientation, to talk about strategies, correct?
Mhm.
All right.
So, this is the mutually responsive orientation. I'm like, did it? I've said it a lot of times. Um, so that is actually a research construct. So when they're studying attachment, that is one of the things they're specifically looking for. Like, does this little dyad, does this parent-child little partner, do they like display mutually responsive orientation? And so, in order to study that, they have to come up with a way to measure it, right? So,
Okay.
they have this little scale. It's basically just like these few things they can look for when they're seeing, like, all right, when we're studying this, where is it? So, what does that look like, Laura? They have this scale for the mutually responsive
Okay.
orientation. Tell us up to
So
you.
here's your assignment right now. So I want you to picture you and your child, maybe
Mhm.
just one, or you can do both. It doesn't matter. But picture them
Mhm.
in your head right now,
Okay.
together. Maybe doing an activity could be
Okay.
something familiar. So it's just an easy going kind of um, place that you're in right now. Okay,
Okay.
it's not
I
stressful.
have a visual.
Okay. So this is what I want you to think about as you do this activity, be in this place with your child. Yes or no? Do you have some kind of like little coordinated routines? And your routines can look different than everyone else's, but do you have this sense of knowing what comes next? What comes next in
Yes.
this place or
Yes.
activity you're doing? Do you feel like there is harmonious communication?
Ooh.
Yeah, like
Sometimes.
things are kinda clicking.
Yeah, when things are going well, absolutely,
Yeah,
like, keeping
yeah,
that in mind that,
okay.
um yeah, that and I like the word harmonious.
I know,
That's
right?
one that I
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's
yeah,
benefiting both of us. It's good, it's
it
peaceful.
is. Alright, here's another one, yes or no. Do you feel like there's, like, this mutual cooperation? You each give and take a little
Yes.
here, give and take a little here,
Yes.
and then the 4th kind of measurement is, how about the emotional ambiance?
Ooh.
All right. Is there this sense of affection and support, as well as, kind of allowing the child to tell you and give you some of their ideas? You might try on those ideas. So, this
Mhm.
emotional ambiance of they have something to share with me and I will partake of the sharing.
Yes. Yes.
Then I congratulate you of having a positive MRO,
Yeah.
right? Is that how this works? Yes, you have a mutually
Oh.
responsive orientation.
Well, and I like that, it's like, okay, we don't want a rigid checklist that is like, "Oh, you didn't check all boxes, you fail," right? That's not what we're
Right.
doing.
No.
We're looking at the way that I might see emotional ambiance or the way that I might see harmonious communication can look different than yours, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not a like this or no, it's a how? Like, how does this look for you? How does this look for you?
Yes.
Um, and so I see that as so helpful as we think about, okay, we want secure attachment, regardless of the age of our kids. We know that's going to help them regulate. And so it's like, okay, these are things I can kind of just like be looking for and thinking about
Mhm.
building into our relationship a little more. So
Yes.
I just
Yes.
love that. I
That's
love
awesome.
MRO, MRO.
Tomorrow.
You're like, yeah, Mackenzie, we know you said it 54 times. Mutually responsive orientation. I know what it stands for.
Well, all right. Well, maybe we'll see if Barb knows what
Yeah.
MROs are, because now is the time for our Stop, Breathe, Talk section of our podcast, where we
Mhm.
bring in, typically it's our producer, Mackenzie DeYoung, but we're bringing in our writer, Barb Dunn Swanson, this season to share with us some thoughts that she has about regulation, and specifically this episode about attachment and how that interplays with regulation.
Yes, mutually. Mutual. I
Yes.
like this whole idea of attachment and talking about how significant attachment is because our kids are in their safe place. I
Yes.
Yes.
loved when you called that like home base.
Right? Wasn't that so
Yeah,
good?
that
Lori's
is
so good.
such that is such a great analogy because when our kids feel like they can trust us and that we're going to take care of them, we're going to meet their needs, going to feed them on time, we're going to make sure they're safe,
Mhm.
answer questions that they bring to us. When we do those kinds of things, they continue to build that strong attachment to us. They trust
Yes.
that what we do on a regular basis and that routine that you mentioned. We've done a podcast before on how significant routines are
Mm.
Yes.
for
More than
kids.
one.
Yes.
And
Yes.
even as adults, think about how valuable your routine is
Yes.
to your own regulation.
Mhm.
So here's what I want to kind of throw out there for consideration today.
Okay.
I want us
Alright.
to think a little bit about when things do get tough, and the adult is the first one who has to consider a response. You talk about that serve and
Mm,
return,
Mhm.
that back and forth communication, or the adult notices there's some type of a dysregulation.
mm,
Mhm.
Something's going on, and it starts with the adult. The adult
mhm,
has to help that child figure out how to come back into regulation. So,
Yes.
the thing I want to focus on then is what are the skills that we can, or strategies that we
Mhm.
can use to help those kids know that they're safe with us,
mhm,
realize
Mm.
that it's okay for me to be dysregulated for a time, but
mhm,
it doesn't mean that I am not going to help you to re-regulate. What are some skills that you might have
Mm.
had to use with your own kids
mm.
to help them move toward re-regulation?
That's a good question.
And I'm gonna jump in and say one while you
Okay.
Okay.
think.
Okay.
One time, Lori, I believe you said it might not be saying a thing at all.
Mhm,
Mm.
It might be the quiet
mhm,
of just sitting
Mhm.
together quietly with no words at all. It lowers the heart rate
mhm,
and it allows us time to think. We're doing that stop, breathe, talk moment.
Mhm.
mhm,
But there are other skills that I think or other techniques we use to help our kids when they're at home base to get
Mhm.
re-regulated. What would another couple of ideas look
So I
like?
have one for you, Mackenzie.
You do?
I do.
I was being selfish. I wasn't thinking about you.
No, I was like, "Oh, I can't think of a name," but I can think of one for so when you were I think you were making dinner and your daughter really needed to be loud, and so you let her be loud out on the step outside the
Yes.
door, right? She was dysregulated, you were dysregulated, and you're like, "You know what? You tell the story." Yes.
Oh, yeah, my daughter was like right around 2, maybe a little younger than that, and she was just loud. I mean, which I am, like, so and I eventually almost I kind of asked it in a fed up way, like, "Do you just need to be loud? Like, do you feel like you have to be loud right now?" And she looked at me and was like, "Yes."
Yes.
Like,
Actually do.
I just need to be loud right now." And I was like, "Stop re-talk," is what that is.
Yes.
I needed to stop re-talk, and then I said, like, "Okay, I need it quiet right now. Um, but you could be loud outside.
Mhm.
Should we?" And it was winter, so I was like, "Should we bundle up and you can yell on the steps. You can be as
Yes.
loud as you want." And so, sure enough, she thought that was a great idea, and so she threw on her coat and her hat, and at
Yes.
like in our home, I could sit on the steps inside and see her on the steps outside. And
Mhm.
so I just sat inside and her yelling was outside and I was inside.
I love it. Yes. Yes.
Which actually leads me to mine, if I can jump in before you share
Yeah.
one for you.
Yes.
Um, I think something that I do, even not always consciously, part of it might be the age of my kids because they're littler, that like staying in proximity to my
Mm.
kids
Mhm.
when they're dysregulated. And sometimes, like my son in particular, like, I want space. Like, I don't want you to help me. I don't want a hug. I don't want right? I want space.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, you can have that space and I stay available. Like,
Mhm.
and when you are ready. And so staying kind of nearby. And
Yes.
so again, part of that might be like the supervision of being with young children, but I
Yeah.
trying to stay available even when my kids like aren't ready for connection,
Mhm.
when they're dysregulated. So that's
Yes.
probably, yeah, availability.
I
Okay,
was
Lori, I want to
thinking
hear one for you.
so I was thinking of it, when my girls were younger, but then I was like, you know what? Really, honestly, sometimes what I do when they're dysregulated now at this age is I just listen. Like, I
Mm,
don't try to fix. I just
yes.
listen. Nod my
Yes.
head, put my phone down, give them some eye contact, and I
Mhm.
just listen.
Yes.
I think that that is if totally a strategy for as they have been older. And then I think a really fun one that I have been known to do is the times that, we just are dysregulated with our energy. I
Mm.
maybe have been known to, jump in puddles, run in the rain with them, send them
Yes.
out in the puddles, and I know one
Yes.
summer we were we were by a lake and it rained and there was a big puddle somewhere, and I took my nieces and nephews and we all went and jumped in the puddle because we had been inside in the cabin all together while it rained, and I think the
Yes.
rest of the adults were like, "Okay, this is driving us crazy," and I was like, "Let's go jump in the puddles," and the
We need to
children were
get the
like,
energy out.
"We're gonna go jump in puddles," and I was like, "Yes, yes, we are gonna go jump in
Oh.
puddles." So those kind of things. Yeah.
Yes. I love that.
Those are some great examples. And what they are, they're examples of the fact that we are going to have opportunities to regulate together. I talk
Mm.
about we don't expect kids to have to know how to do this by themselves, that we're going to give them opportunities to co regulate. We'll work
Yes.
with you as you start to re regulate, as you
Yes.
start to think
Mm.
about how you want to behave or
Yes.
how you want to
Yes.
communicate, speak.
Mhm.
Because when we're dysregulated, things might not come out
Mhm.
sounding nice. They might come out
Yes.
sounding
I've been there.
grouchy or
Yeah.
mean. But we want you to get re regulated and we'll help you get there. That's what
Mhm.
home base
Yes.
is all about, isn't it?
Yes.
So, and
Home
it's
Yes.
about,
base.
we've also talked about aligning. What you gave as examples to me sounds a lot like aligning with your kids. I can
Mhm.
see where you're at and I'm willing to give you the space you need. I would feel similarly if I were disappointed or if something,
Mhm.
in
Yes.
my routine got upset. I would feel the same way. Let's just, take some time to calm down and get re-regulated.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Oh.
for thinking through those. I think people really
Yes.
they come on here and they maybe just want a new skill, a new strategy, and sometimes to hear
Yes.
what other people have done is just what they need to hear.
Mhm.
Or what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what not to do.
Oh, but I
Oh.
think you bring in a great point about attachment, Barb, is the attachment is the ongoing relationship, right? It is when we're dysregulated. It is like even when we're creating a home base that's a secure attachment or a
Mhm.
foundation of that relationship. That doesn't mean we're never dysregulated. It
Right.
just
We're
means we have
human.
different
Yep.
skills, right? If we
Yes.
have secure attachment, we can have more skills to tap into, but still got to teach them, which
They're
is
not
hard
gonna know
in a
it. They're
way.
not gonna know it without us, being involved with them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks so much, Barb.
You are welcome.
Thank
Mm,
you.
yes. So, that is, we're talking about attachment, and she makes such a great point. I'm so glad I'm always, I always think that, like, oh, I'm so glad we didn't get through the episode without saying that.
Yes.
Or making that point that yes, attachment is happening in the difficult moments and the ones
Mhm.
that take your breath away and the ones that take your volume up
Mhm.
and everywhere in between. And so but yeah, that home base, that secure attachment gives our kids to explore both their environment and to explore their own emotional regulation, what works well for them, because we
Yes.
do provide kind of that safe place. So attachment's a
We do.
great way to encourage regulation in our kids.
It is. So next week we're wrapping up, right?
Yes. Yes, we're gonna do some final sense making of
Final sense
everything,
making.
right? Of everything we've talked through this season. And you know how I kept saying like it connects, but it's it. We'll piece those all together.
Okay, excellent. So thanks for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. And remember, if you're a regular listener, you can actually watch us on video as well. And sometimes Mackenzie DeYoung, she puts in some, visual aids. And so find us on our social media and look for those videos as well.
Yes. Please do come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Lori Kothals and Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.